If humanity disappeared tonight, millions of machines would keep running on their own. For a little while, I'll show you how nature would slowly reclaim the planet and transform our greatest cities into forgotten ruins. When most people picture a world without humans, they imagine abandoned buildings covered in moss after thousands of years. But the places that have actually been left behind tell a very different story. The transformation begins far sooner and in ways that are far stranger than most people expect. Within less than 72 hours, the systems that keep countless cities dry would begin to fail. Groundwater, held back for decades by pumps and drainage networks, would gradually force its way back to the surface. Basements would fill with water, underground tunnels would slowly flood, entire neighborhoods built on damp ground would begin to sink under the weight of something that had always been waiting beneath them. Right now, there is water beneath the foundations of your city. The only reason you never notice it is because someone is controlling it every single day. Within only a month, the first new inhabitants would arrive. Not wolves, not bears. First insects, then rodents. Soon after, larger predators would follow the trail of easy food. At the same time, hidden roots would continue spreading through tiny cracks that years of heat and freezing temperatures had been quietly widening. Only a year later, plants would already begin tearing apart the asphalt. A decade later, something unexpected would happen. The first buildings to fail wouldn't necessarily be the oldest ones. Many of the first structures to break down would actually be among the newest. Glass towers, waterproof seals, ventilation systems, and modern materials were all designed with one assumption in mind: that someone would always be there to inspect and maintain them. Once that maintenance disappears, that assumption disappears with it. Older buildings made from stone and reinforced concrete would often outlast many modern structures. Within just 15 years, much of today's familiar skyline would already be almost impossible to recognize. After a century, only isolated structures would remain. The cities themselves would no longer exist as we know them. Many steel bridges would collapse long before stone structures built centuries ago. And that's where an uncomfortable realization begins to emerge. Nature doesn't actively destroy what we build. It simply stops holding it together. But not every trace of humanity would disappear so easily. Even 1,000 years from now, unmistakable evidence of our existence would still be buried across the planet. Layers of plastic locked inside sediments would remain. Tiny microplastics would still be resting in the deepest parts of the oceans. Chemical fingerprints left behind in rocks would continue telling our story long after we were gone. Those marks already exist, regardless of what happens on the surface tomorrow. And that completely changes the question: how much of what humanity has created can truly vanish, and how much of it will remain forever? In 1986, an enormous region of Ukraine was evacuated in less than 48 hours. Thousands of square kilometers were suddenly left without people. What happened there became one of the most remarkable accidental experiments in modern history. For the first time, scientists were able to watch how nature responds when humans suddenly disappear. At first glance, the images seem almost hopeful. Forests spread across abandoned land. Wolves returned to places they hadn't occupied for generations. Deer wandered freely across roads that were once crowded with traffic. But when researchers looked beyond the surface, they discovered a far more complicated reality. Biologist Tim Mousseau spent more than 20 years studying the region. His research revealed that although many large animals returned, Numerous bird species and invertebrates remained far less common in the most contaminated areas. The disappearance of humans didn't erase the damage, it simply allowed vegetation to grow over it. What emerged wasn't the ecosystem that had existed before. It became an entirely different one. And that discovery raises an even bigger question. If a single contaminated region could change so dramatically, what happens when the soil, the oceans, and the atmosphere of an entire planet are altered at the same time? Under normal circumstances, ecosystems have an incredible ability to recover. Burned forests often grow back. Polluted rivers can slowly become clean again. Species pushed close to extinction sometimes return once the pressure is removed. The scientific evidence supporting that resilience is strong. But there's another possibility scientists continue to consider. Sometimes ecosystems don't return to what they once were. Instead, they cross a tipping point and settle into an entirely new balance. Not because they're permanently broken, but because the conditions that once existed are simply gone. And no one knows exactly how many of those invisible thresholds humanity may have already crossed. Geological records suggest that this chapter of Earth's history will remain visible for hundreds of thousands of years. Changes in atmospheric carbon will leave lasting evidence. Species transported across continents will permanently reshape ecosystems. Countless extinctions that can never be reversed will remain part of the planet's record long after our cities have disappeared. This isn't a prediction about the future. It's already happening today. What scientists continue debating is not whether these changes exist. The real question is how significant they will be over immense stretches of time. Some researchers believe the planet will eventually reorganize itself into a new balance. Others argue that reorganization should never be confused with true recovery. Both perspectives are supported by scientific evidence. That brings us to the question that matters most. If humanity disappeared tomorrow, what kind of world would the remaining life inherit? It probably wouldn't be a lifeless or destroyed planet. Life has already survived asteroid impacts. It has endured supervolcanoes. It has overcome 5 mass extinction events. It would almost certainly survive us as well. But it also wouldn't be the same Earth that existed before humans appeared. It would become something entirely different. Our fingerprints would still be embedded in the chemistry of the oceans. They would remain visible in the way species are distributed across the planet. They would also be preserved within layers of rock that future civilizations, or whatever comes after us, might one day study, not as the ruins of a vanished civilization, but as one of the ingredients that shaped the planet itself. And perhaps that's the most unsettling realization of all. Maybe we've been asking the wrong question from the very beginning. Maybe nothing we have done can truly be erased. Perhaps what humanity set in motion was never separate from nature in the first place. Perhaps it is simply nature moving faster, guided by human hands, yet still part of the same, larger system. A species capable of redirecting rivers, changing the chemistry of entire oceans, and reshaping continents in only a few centuries is undoubtedly extraordinary. But maybe the real mystery was never what we were doing to Earth. Maybe the real mystery is what part of us will still remain after we're gone. Our cities would eventually disappear. Our buildings would crumble into dust. The names that seem permanent today would slowly fade from memory until no one remembered them at all. Yet some of the consequences of our existence would continue traveling through the world long after the last human voice had fallen silent. They would remain suspended in the atmosphere. They would linger within the oceans. They would continue shaping the species that survived. They would become part of the rocks that might one day reveal our story to whoever comes next. Thousands of years from now, Earth wouldn't simply be a planet that recovered from humanity. It would be a planet that absorbed humanity into its own history. Our presence would no longer be visible to the eye, but it would still exist as part of everything that followed. Perhaps species never disappear as completely as we imagine. Maybe they continue living through the marks they leave on the world around them. And if that's true, humanity won't ultimately be remembered because of the cities it built. Instead, it will be remembered for the planet it helped shape, for better or for worse. That may be the legacy that outlasts every monument, every civilization, and every name ever carved into stone. Long after every skyline has vanished from the horizon, the world itself will continue carrying the quiet fingerprints of our existence. In the end, our greatest monument may not be anything we ever constructed. It may be the version of Earth we leave behind.